You're listening to Blue Please right here on CynicalBrit.com with myself, Total Biscuit. Total Biscuit. Yes. He's the excessive version. He adds things to words that are not required. Yeah. Total Biscuit. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about this particular little animal. So, the Raids and Dungeons panel is always, in my opinion, the one and only reason to actually pay attention to BlizzCon. That's a lie. The other reason is to watch people break their legs at the dance contest and laugh. I'm going to hell, aren't I? Oh dear. He didn't actually break his leg, as far as I'm aware, but it was fairly amusing nonetheless. There were some pretty damn good costumes, I must say, though. It's not worth going to BlizzCon to see that, but it's certainly worth watching the stream, or at least grabbing some kind of, well, let's just say, less than legitimate version after the fact. Although there are some people that definitely should not be in costume, especially not when they're particularly revealing. I've got to say that frickin' priest, holy crap. Did you see that? That was unbelievable, with a big, stonking Ulduar mace. Awesome. So very awesome. I wonder if he was German. Seems like the Germans always bring the best possible costumes. Holy hell. Yeah, that was great. There were a few others that were fairly reasonable as well. The Deathwing was comical, I'll give you that. It wasn't particularly good per se, but it was very, very funny. So I don't really mind. There was also this really, really bad Moonkin. It's a really bad Moonkin, but I liked it anyway. It's just... so, it looks like a moose! Oh, man. Righto, ladies and gentlemen. So, let's talk about what actually matters, and that's content, real content, stuff that matters, like the Raids and Dungeons panel. So, a lot of things were said there that I would like to touch upon, but the one that I want to talk about most is the concept of 2D maps for each dungeon with detailed boss info, including loot lore and abilities. Basically, in-game Atlas loot. So, the rundown of what this basically is, because they didn't really show an awful lot of it, they just talked about it very briefly, but it was I wouldn't say the highlight per se, because it's not amazingly good news, but it was one of the most poignant things actually said in the Raids and Dungeons panel, aside from the information about the Firelands, which is coming in patch 4.1. That's going to be a 7-boss raid dungeon. Outdoor, but... let me put it this way about the Firelands. I liked the fact that they said, well, it's similar to the Hyjal raid, the layout, not the terrible wave upon wave. Thank you, Blizzard, for really accepting that the Hyjal model was awful and that you should never do it again. Oh, so bad. So very bad. Oh, God. I remember having to do the trash every time you wiped on a boss. Why would you do this? Oh... Why? So much horrible. Anyway. Detailed boss info. So here's how it goes. You won't have to pull a boss and die anymore to find out what he does. And they said, we're not going to tell you how the boss works, but we want you to have an idea of what you're getting into. There's also going to be a 3D portrait of the boss, which is entirely pointless. It helps with recognition, folks. You know what? I'm confused. I don't know which of these creatures is the boss. So there's these little trash mobs that say above them, Firelands Elemental, and Firelands Ravager, and Firelands Rock Fiend, and Firelands Boulder thing. And then you have this giant 40-foot-tall guy with a really nice model with a title, and it's like, Lord Burninator. Yes. Slayer of Peasants. I wonder which of these is the boss. Better get out a handy 3D portrait, folks. You know, this is the kind of thing where you could have a little bit of augmented reality going. You hold your iPhone up to the screen, and then it recognizes the various models. It says, this one is the boss. And then I shoot myself, because the world has gone to hell. Anyway. These abilities will appear in both dungeons and raids. What do I think about that? God. It's such a difficult subject to broach, because there's the part of me that knows exactly how things work and how raiding has worked for the past 5 or 6 years. Hell, not just raiding, dungeons in general, you know, when you actually needed strats for dungeons before the Rathanation, whereby you didn't need anything. And then there's the idealist within me, which is not entirely extinguished by the tides of my cynicism, although it's getting there, I must say. It goes with age, folks, trust me. By the time I'm 30, I will hate everything and everyone. And that part of me says, oh, I wish people could experience what it's like learning a boss for the first time and actually working out its mechanics as you go. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't appreciate that because, well, they're not the kind of person that enjoys venturing into the unknown. That's a shame. I think those of us who are maybe older gamers that are used to doing things and playing games before the age of Game Whacks and YouTube Let's Plays and things like that, maybe have a little bit more fondness for the idea of taking on something and learning about it through failure and learning about it as you go and exploring the actual boss's mechanics. And then the newer generation perhaps is all about the guides and the walkthroughs and the hibbity-hop and things like playing it optimally and saying, oh, well, you know, if you don't do this with 110 freaking %, then you are useless and you must use everything at your disposal to make sure that happens. They're the same kind of people that buy fast trigger and modded controllers to play Call of Duty. They're the same kind of people that buy those stupid $80 glasses that apparently make you see better on the damn screen. They give you a higher contrast ratio so you can determine who is your enemy and who is not. They're the kind of people that buy gamer grub and really expensive keyboards and think it makes them elite. They're the kind of person that, on a recent video that I linked on my channel, a very, very good remix of some Sonic music, done in fact by the same guy who did the Streets of Rage stuff in the pre-show, Andy Gillian, will say, you are a noob because you didn't get Hypersonic. These are the kind of people they are. If you do not play 110% oh my god optimal, then you are a waste of flesh. And in order to do that, of course, you need every advantage you can get, and wasting time by learning a fight is suboptimal, because I must blast through the content as quickly as possible. Now, there is some respect, of course, to be had for people that really, really want to optimize their game and play to the best of their ability. Indeed, I wish everyone would. However, it does come down to the simple fact, and this is where the realist comes in, that these guides, these descriptions as to how things work, they will always exist. They have always existed. There was a... That's not actually true, is it? There was a short period of time. I don't believe this carried on much into Tier 2.5, but up until about Tier 2, there was a time when boss strategies for raid encounters were actually kept secret. They were very, very hard to access. Indeed, I recall one of the first guilds that started releasing that information was Inner Sanctum. I remember reading Inner Sanctum raid guides for Molten Core. This, of course, was way after everything had been beaten. But raid strategies were kept secret. Raids were not filmed. It seems odd now in the days of where getting the kill video out is of paramount importance, getting the guide out is of paramount importance. Hell, if you remember Boss Killers before it sold out to gold sellers and became useless, used to pay people for the guides. They used to demand, absolutely demand, that you get the guide up as quickly as possible so you could get a cash bounty. That used to be the way of things. And now it still is, really. The world first kill video is actually, in many cases, vital. There are several companies, mine being one of them, that does make its money off of producing videos like that. And getting it out first is important. It has actually become business to some degree. Which, of course, is good for a lot of people, including myself, who want to do this for a living, but it's not so good on the simple fact that nobody really gets to explore the fight anymore. You have to make a concerted effort to avoid this kind of information. You would have to have a guild that swears off guides completely and learns the old-fashioned way. You know, it would be interesting, actually, if we got a division within Trollface that did that. People that never watched my wipe-a-thons and never watched my raid guides and don't read strategies and things like that and just go into dungeons completely blind.
I think it's quite sad, actually, that because they're testing so much of this raid content, and we have covered the idea before that this is... It's not that it's bad, because the net result is that you get a more stable and more balanced encounter, but it's bad in the sense that Blizzard doesn't properly balance their own stuff and can't properly test their own stuff. So you run into the situation that all of the fights have been done and catalogued and have diagrams and pie charts and nice things like that all ready for you. That's a lot of the raid content that I have done so far. I mean, I've done everything in Bastion of Twilight, with the exception of one fight, which, credit to them, as far as I can tell, they are not going to release Lady Sinestra within the beta, and I would hope not. That fight should not be tested. That's one of the super uber hard bosses, ladies and gents. You can only unlock that by beating Cho'Gall on Heroic. So this boss is amazing god tier uber boss, and I'm really looking forward to giving it a try. That will probably not be tested. But everything else, I mean, there are strategies out for all of the Blackwing Descent bosses. There are strategies out for all of the Bastion of Twilight bosses, and I believe Alakia now have a strat as well. So, that information is there. Not for the heroics, yet, but it will be. Because, again, it is business. When it comes to written guides, we're talking about getting people to your site. I mean, you've got community sites like Mana Flask who are putting out a lot of written guides, and they're very good written guides. And like I say, Mana Flask is a great site, run by Insidia and For the Horde. Exceptional raiding community site. I'd highly recommend you check it out. Getting the guides up for them ensures the continued survival of the site, because if you don't get hits on your site, you can't generate revenue and you can't keep it running. And then, of course, the community stagnates and dies because no one's posting there. So, yeah, that's just the simple reality of it. Putting it in-game is an interesting idea, because they're saying that they're not going to tell you how the boss works, but they're going to tell you about his abilities. Well, here's the thing, and this is what I would say to people who are perhaps very turned off by this change. A lot of that stuff is already there and has been for a while. You've been able to click abilities within-game for quite some time, and they will tell you what they do. The thing is, in the middle of a fight, it's a bit of a pain in the ass, and sometimes he won't do the ability, so you don't get to click on it and read it. To me, that just seems like they're implementing what's already in the game into a more manageable and easy-to-read format. And what I will say about it is that I like the idea that they're putting a lore description in. What I would also say to Blizzard about that is not an excuse to completely ignore the idea of delivering lore via in-game cutscenes and in-game events, which is the most effective way as far as I'm concerned. For instance, I like to give a prime example of this. This is something that's in the Blackwing Descent, and something I hope will continue to be in current raid dungeons and future ones. Antramides, you remember that guy, the Sonic Dragon, the second boss? I think he's the second boss. He might not be. The Omnitron defense system might be, but like I said, they keep taking encounters offline and online, and it's difficult to tell which is first. There's a cutscene with Nefarian and Malarayak, the chief alchemist, whereby it shows you how Antramides was created. It was a botched experiment by Malarayak on a little whelp, and he ended up blinding the whelp. But Nefarian, instead of having it destroyed, said, I might have a use for this one, and he actually trains it and creates this giant blind dragon out of it. And funnily enough, now we have more lore about Antramides than we do about most of the other non-critical raid bosses. I mean, what's the lore behind XC002? What's the lore behind Flame Leviathan? What's the lore behind most of the stuff in Icecrown Citadel, for instance? Who the hell's Lord Marigar? Lady Death Whisper? I mean, Salfang's got a bit of lore behind it. But the rest of it, Putricide, Rotface, Vestiger, like I said, there's no lore there. So it would be nice if not only if we get those descriptions, because I will happily read them. You know, I like reading about boss lore. It's kind of neat. It's probably the only part of the lore I actually care about. It would be nice if we can get that in combination with more of these in-game events and cutscenes. And as regards to actual strategy, here's the thing. They are going to get it one way or the other. It might as well be in-game, and it might as well at least have some information. Because then at least you're not telling people, oh, you gotta go read this, go do that, and at least pugs, for anything, don't have an excuse for not knowing what an encounter actually does. Not that they'll read this stuff anyway. You know, we're talking about bad players here. I don't really see the problem with it. It's not worth raging about because, like I say, the net effect on the actual game is nil. From a design philosophy standpoint, I think it's difficult to justify not putting it in there, and at the same time, it's a real shame that they've had to go to that point. Because I do remember times, and indeed have done so in the beta, where we've been doing encounters that have not had guides. And I'll tell you what, it is a great, great feeling indeed. My name's Total Biscuit, you are listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. This is Kalmar, the name of this track is Heroes to Us. I'll be right back after this to go through some Q&A with you. Enjoy.